Good morning and welcome to the MP podcast. Today we're discussing one of the probably most fascinating topics on these 3 days of the MPE, which is about digital wallets. I'm Panagiotis Kriaris from Unzer, and I have the pleasure to host Arda, Cagaptay from Delivery Hero, and Arnaud Crouzet from FIM so that's the group, right?
Consulter Perrier.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you for coming. We're gonna have 15 minutes to discuss about digital wallets, and maybe let me start with some numbers. So basically, if you see digital wallets, they are the number one and fastest growing payment method globally. I think there's a forecast that says that we're gonna have 5.2 billion users by 2026, so not very far away. 50% is the market share on the e-com side, and I think 30% is on the POS side. So I mean these are huge numbers. So the question is, what are the reasons behind the rise of digital wallets? What do you think? Maybe we start with Arda, and
Sure.
then we. So I don't know, 2-3 main key reasons why you think this is the case.
Sure, Panagiotis, let me explain. So I think geography is the first one I can say, because in geographies like Asia, for example, wallets are booming and always beyond Europe, because their regulation is not that strict as in Europe, and because of the bank structure and even landscape of the countries put lots of shape to it. For example, in Philippines, you have more than thousands of islands. You don't have that much of bank infrastructure, so you must have a wallet there, like infrastructure that people can reach. And in Bangladesh, for example, one of our market, that cash is still the king, 98%. So no one almost have cards, right? And they need to use wallets for other fintechs who are just BK, for example.
So basically, is the absence of cards, if I understand
would say
it well.
absence of
so
cards and
one is
banks.
the main reason, okay?
Is one reason, and I would say second one is the regulations. It's not that strict as in Europe, and merchants are trying to find their own way, and also the wallet providers and fintechs to make things better for them. But in Europe, when you come to Europe, merchants or wallet providers need to wait for the regulation. They need someone to come to save them, right?
Okay. But okay, Arnaud, what would you say?
I would say that first, above all, is convenience. In fact, and why wallets are growing so quickly? It's convenient for the customers. Now we have a smartphone. And that revolution of the smartphone helps us also to have different way to interact with our ecosystem by default. And we want to have everything in it. And it's why it is first convenient for the user to have everything in their smartphone. The main question is, what could be the right application or the right applications that a user can use to interact with P2P, with merchants, with all the different type of ecosystem. So this is a main question, and it's going back to your point in terms of regulation, by the way. If we have a too strict regulation, this can be a limitation to the development of wallet.
Let's maybe touch upon this, because I think it's very interesting. So I think Arda mentioned that we see this great difference in terms of geographies. I mean, if you look at Asia, let's say they're very, very advanced. I mean, you have China, of course. You have then markets in Africa, but there was a different model with the telecoms. I mean, in Europe, we now have also digital wallets, but I guess because in Europe we used to have, cards are very strong. That's why you don't see wallets being, let's say, we don't see the market share that they have in other.
I'm not so sure that is for that reason, excuse me, because it depends on what we propose to the customers. In fact, you say that in Europe is not so strong as some other countries. Indeed, the different situations are different from Africa, Latin America, for instance, or Asia, different way to work. But if we can't move on in Europe, or if we can't develop a specific type of application, this could be a strong constraint to develop this type of ecosystem. Look for on iOS, for instance, everything was blocked for the NFC in iOS. So it was not possible to develop any type of application on using NFC. That now is possible.
But exactly to this point, Europe was the one, let's say, forcing Apple to unblock NFC, right?
Yes.
So it's
and it's why in Europe the only alternative that we had before was on QR code.
Yeah.
But Europe was not really using this type of QR code. It was new, where in Asia, it was QR code based by
Exactly.
default.
I would say that you have exactly. So I would say that NFC is probably a bit more sophisticated and it's more popular in Europe. QR codes are more popular in Asia and in these markets, right? So in terms of the geographies, I mean, back to Arnaud's point, I mean, in Europe, Arda, we have, I don't know, 27 markets. I mean, there is a lot of a discussion, who is gonna, there's no one, if there's gonna be a global player, if there's gonna be, kind of, a super app. So you have this kind of discussion. So what do you think, maybe we do the comparison versus, super app definition in the, let's say, globally or in Asia versus what we have in the West, not only Europe, let's say, in the West, to understand the differences.
So yeah, let me explain. From my side, when I compare with Asia and Europe, there's like a still big difference on this one because like super apps are like always in Europe perceived as like apps from like fintech providers or from banks, right? From someone licensed and from someone like really be on this business, and that's a big kind of a prevention. To be honest, like to just go further. But in Asia, just take the example of Grab, for example. Grab is one of the biggest, like the marketplace still, and they have, of course, their own license. But they are the only and the main super app that you can show, for example, in the Southeast Asian side. But when you think of WeChat, for example, or like Alipay, they're really strong, right? Because of the population of the countries, of course, but they are the super apps as well. So no one is waiting for fintechs or banks to just launch something. They are doing by themselves and seeing the value. They want to capitalize on their customers, and super apps are coming. One more point about QR code and NFC. In Europe, what we are doing is always we are waiting for something structured, something specific from the regulator, like more technological, more safe, right? Like NFC, for example. You cannot intervene into an NFC that easily. There are like lots of rules and security behind. But QR codes are like good workarounds.
Very easy. That's why they're
so easy and workaround.
Yeah.
So they don't need to wait for Apple to say yes to go for green light. Okay, guys, we are doing and we are getting the market. That's it. So,
yeah.
And indeed, with QR code, we can use it on any type of support. NFC is really for face-to-face, for proximity mainly. But with QR code, we can use on the proximity, but also on internet, on many ways to use it.
It's very simple, and you see it everywhere in Asia.
But it was not the mentality of in Europe.
Exactly.
What changed a few in Europe is with the pandemic, where we were forced to use QR code. Exactly. So this changed a few, the fact to use QR code. Yes. But it was seen as old-fashioned before.
At the end of the day, it's about use cases, right? So, and as you say, in the pandemic, there was a need for servicing these use cases. That's why they started becoming more popular in the West as well. Back to Arda's point around the super apps. I mean, Arnaud, what's your opinion? I mean, if you look, let's say, at the super apps that you have in Asia, I mean, the thing is that you have one main app, and you don't have to leave the app to do anything, right? So you can service all of your needs within the app with these mini programs, with these mini apps. Whereas if you look at, I don't know, if you look at what's happening in the West, maybe you take Revolut, which is probably the closest we have to a super app, and then you have all these kinds of bits and pieces, but it's not exactly the same. So,
I would say that the main issue that we have in Europe is all the different players want to keep the hand of the customer relation. Two things. First, we focus too much on payment and not on the different type of services that we want to bring to the customers. And then each one want to manage himself, the customer. It is always my customer. It could be from a bank, from a merchant, from a telco operator, for anyone. It is my customer. And this is a big issue because we don't want to share services on one side, and most of the time we are focusing mainly on payments. In super app in Asia, the payment is just a mean.
Yeah.
They are focusing on the customer first.
I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, the customer relationship is probably the number one factor that is changing in this game, right? So it's who is controlling the customer relationship. So if you have the super app being the means via which I access all my day-to-day, then it makes a bit difference because, whoever is behind they don't play a role. I mean, whoever is controlling the front end, the access to the app is probably the one setting the rules, and that's the big difference. So everyone wants to be in this game.
Yeah, but before it was a war on some wallet, especially in terms of payment, to be at the top of the payment of the wallet, especially for card for payment.
Yeah.
So each one wanted to have his card first to be sure that the user will use it. Now the war is no more on who is the first, but who has the ownership of the wallet. So it's why we have a lot of wallets arriving in the market, which is becoming very difficult also for the customer.
Yeah.
This is a constraint for the customer. They don't want to use hundreds of wallets. It's not possible. We can see also on Android, you can already have different type of wallets for payments between Android Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, many others. But as a user, what do you want to use exactly? Which one you use? If you have the same services in each one, that is becoming difficult to choose somehow.
Okay.
So what are the different additional services and how we can go to more services? And it's where you discuss, you talk about identity, for instance. That initiative of digital identity in Europe, first, it's not just Europe, it's worldwide.
Exactly.
But this could also be a game changer, I would say, in terms of what...
I wanted to probably touch base on this later on, but since you mentioned, I think, we do see a convergence between digital wallets and identity. And as you say, this is a global trend. So this is not only happening in Europe, but in Europe, we do have the European digital identity wallet. So maybe we can discuss, I don't know, Arda. I mean, Arnaud mentioned some of the, why is this happening? And what are the changes? What are the implications for the consumers and for the players?
So for that one, for the European Digital Identity Wallet, I mean, it's a promising thing. But the thing is that when we check the track record of Europe, I have never seen anything like merchant friendly, for example, right? And for this one, merchants always needs to be on the game and they need to shape the game a bit. And in most of the cases, merchants are waiting for their destiny, I would say, in Europe because of regulation expectations and others, while in Asia, as we were discussing, they're not waiting for it and they are just doing something. And for this one, this would be like really helpful from the use cases perspective, especially from security perspective for wallets. If merchants are counted and they are on the game, can just provide the solution and can utilize from their customer more.
But maybe just take one step back. Why does this make a difference? So adding, let's say, identity in a wallet, very simply speaking, why is this a game changer? Because I think it is. Why would you say that this is, let's forget Europe for a moment and how the implementation is being done. Why is this a game changer?
Okay, got it. So game changer because it somehow like creates like one single point of like verification and for the customer, and customer doesn't need to just go each wallet provider or like merchant wallet to just onboard themselves each and every time if it's integrated properly, right? So you will have the identity. I know Panagiotis, right? Okay, he's the guy.
Yeah.
And now in Revolut, you can just use it. In Delivery Hero and in Foodora, you can use it, for example. So that's the thing.
If I may rephrase, so basically, identifying ourselves is a big part of what we do day to day. I mean, you have to go anywhere, you have to go to a hotel, you have to rent a car. I mean, you need to identify yourself. So imagine if this is taken away and you can do it in advance, like you are checking in an airline, for example, you have to check in before and it's working.
Yeah, indeed. Identity is key, and also for the payment. We need to have this type of identity in payment, for instance, to protect against fraud or anything. We have 3DS RISE to check the identity of the. Well, it's not directly the identity, but authentication of the. And if we can mix the two. And we can use identity as a merchant side, it can be really, really interesting from a checking, and not just for the payment, just for the checking point of view, up to the deliveries of the goods. So you can use identity among the different chain. Merchants also, they have to know or to check the user, the customer in that case. For online, if you can check from the checking directly, you can simplify the onboarding, the logging, all that stuff directly on with the merchant, on the merchant relation with the customers. At the checkout, on the page of the checkout, you can add additional type of services. First, if you have some product, for example, from alcohol, you can check with identity without to ask, the birthday for the customer. Just check if he's major or not, if it's adult or not.
Yeah.
Just checking with the identity. And you in that case, you have also some additional way to protect the credentials from the customers with GDPR in Europe, for instance, because you are not asking for the private information, just if he's an adult or not. You can also use identity within the 3DS rights. Instead to have a friction and then to have the issuer asking to the customer if he's the right person, you can also send information about identities that mentioned at check at the same time up to the issuer, and the issuer can say, okay, he's the right person, so I don't need to ask for an additional friction. So you will have more frictionless. You can improve the conversion rate the relation with the customer. But also for the deliveries of goods, when you send the goods to a customer, to at home and so on, you can also check the identity directly and to check that is the right user, the right person receiving the goods compared to what has been bought. So identity will be or can be a real game changer for merchants.
Exactly. I mean, you mentioned all the use cases. I mean, just to mention a number that I can remember, I think in Europe, I think there is a prediction that 80% of the population, I mean, don't ask me if that's going to happen or not, but I think this is the expectation that 80% of the population is going to be using, the European digital identity in a few years' time. I think 2028 is, if I recall correctly, 30.
Yes.
Yeah, something.
This is the objective of the European Commission.
Which is, I mean, imagine it's going to be a huge change. So let's see how this is.
Just to be cautious on that, because the objective of European regulation is to have 80% of the European citizen with digital wallet for 2030. This is the objective, but doesn't mean that they will not be able, or they may not be able to use it. It depends on the solutions. And for the time being, we have a European wallet on one side, but also different countries that are working on their side on the wallet. Right now, it's still not really usable. Still complex. It's growing. It's going better and better. But then the main question will be how we can mix the identity wallet on one side, the payment wallet on the other side, merchants that they want also to have the end of the wallet, the telcos, the banks, all that ecosystem, how we can have this concentration or harmonization, or it depends. But I think that identity could help to have some additional regulations to simplify that.
I think we agree it's a game changer. Now, because we're short of time, I would like to ask a last question, maybe very short. So Arda, what are for you the main trends? I mean, what do you see? I mean, and you can choose anything. I mean, we discussed about the identity. What are the main things that you see happening, globally?
Sure. So from our experience, after launching in more than 35 countries, our wallet solutions for our riders, for our vendors, and for the customers, and also seeing the market, there's a big trend coming from the merchant wallet side. So it's merchants are trying to just take the money that they left on the table before from the payments perspective to big payment providers like PayPal, for example, right? Like well-known wallets, right? And we now started to see the value. If we just create some additional engagement points, and if we can monetize the customer more, and if we can just give them additional value, and it's coming, definitely. And there are lots of use cases that can come. And as we have seen in Asia, these are developing really quickly. And for example, in Pakistan, what we have done is we are using our riders as almost like an ATM, right? Yeah. And when riders are coming with food deliver at the doorstep, they can just give their change back to their wallet, or they can top up to their wallet because it's cash market. And we almost decrease more than 3 or 4 times the cost of top up to the wallet. Yeah, this was one of the questions of the merchants, how we are going to do that, right? If we are just topping up with the card rails and
it's a very market specific use case.
Exactly. Right? In Philippines as well. I mean, if you're living in an island and if you are really away from a bank or a payment point, when the rider is coming with the food, just top up to the wallet, right? And then with use cases, you can use it. It's coming. And in Europe, it's coming as well. There has been lots of awareness. I had yesterday a nice roundtable in MP here with lots of industry members, even from Stripe was there, MasterCard was there, payment orchestration platforms were there. So it's coming. And merchants wants to just be in the game. They noticed. It's one example maybe. It's you have really nice home, right, to rent, but you don't have the key. This is what's happening with the payment world now. Like you're
Okay.
leaving the key of the home to the PayPal, and you're saying, "Oh, I will need to get some amount and some value from this one," but almost impossible, right? That's why merchant wallets will be the next thing.
Okay. Thank you. It was great discussing with you. I think we all agree that this is a trend that is evolving. So let's see what's going to happen next. Thank you for a very interesting discussion.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.